here with the Social Impact Level Up Live. Today, your job is to sit back, listen, and have some fun, and maybe take a few minutes to relax, because we're going to have an amazing conversation today to turn your ideas into a legacy of social change. Hey everyone, it's me, Wendy V, and we are here live with my friend Michelle. Michelle, remind me, how do you say your last name?
He.
Michelle He. I didn't want to say it wrong, guys.
No worries.
So we are here talking about being your own, kind of up-leveling your story and really building an impact-driven brand. So that's what we're talking about tonight. If you're joining us and you're live with us, go ahead and put that into the chat. Where are you joining from and your name, so we know who's here with us. And I want to make sure that we can shout out anybody who's going to be commenting. So thank you guys for joining us. And the point of tonight's conversation is really the terminating, but maybe not the end. It's supposed to be the last of 4 lives, but we'll probably bring Nishay back if you saw the last one. So we're going to have another live about Uplevel Your Story Challenge, but this is really supposed to be the last one, where we talk about all of the things that we've already done in the challenge and bring it all together. So that is what our conversation with Michelle is. And I just want to give you a second to introduce yourself and tell everybody about you and your amazingness, and then we'll get started in the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for Wendy for the intro. It's so good to be here. So thanks for the opportunity. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Michelle. I'm a brand designer. I run an independent design studio, helping social impact companies, both for-profit and nonprofit, to really develop their brand so they can build more brand awareness in their mission and also connect better with their audience. I've also been in the creative industry for a little over 10 years now. I started working at major entertainment companies to local agencies, doing a variety of design work from like print and digital design. About a year ago, I went full-time on my own and started my design studio, focused on social impact, and really just tried to explore more of like my design skills and how I can contribute to society, specifically like the impact that I want to make, whether it's for sustainability, the environment, anything in public policy, the health industry, nonprofits, just anybody or anything in that social impact space. I guess what's brought me here is that as a teenager, I was a youth advocate for a nonprofit, and I was like really heavily involved in my community. I saw the changes and like the everyday impact that we were making, and I wanted to like bring that level of commitment and impact back into like my life, which has led me here talking to you, Wendy.
I love it. And I know we connected on LinkedIn, so it's exciting that we're here live on LinkedIn and YouTube and on Facebook tonight. And I know my friend Ale is here from Miami, so welcome, Ale. Thanks for being here. She's been in the challenge with me. And so this is the last week of homework that we're doing. So I called my friend Michelle to do this homework with me, because I realized that a lot of people don't understand what it means to build your brand, but we keep saying it. And even in the first week with Dimple Dang, she said, oh, it's important whether you're a person or building a personal brand, or you're an organization building your organization's brand, you have to pay attention to building a brand and building a strong brand. But what does that really mean? So that's what Michelle is here to tell us about.
Yes, thank you. I guess like maybe the short answer would just be like emotion and trust, right? Like, because emotions make people feel connected, and that's essentially what we're doing when we're like branding. I think there's 2 things that we really need to like really figure out before we really break down the different components of branding. I think we need to first, like you said, Wendy, we need to understand what branding really is, because oftentimes and not, people are just thinking that branding is just, like how you look, right? Like your logo, your colors, but really it's more than that. It's this overarching like idea and image that somebody has of you. It's the experience that they have with, your brand that will establish like this perception of your organization. So for example, like what does that audience journey look like? Because the way they interact with you will really in itself define like how like the world sees you. And I think secondly, you need to really, as an organization who's looking to build a strong brand, I think you need to do like an honest like evaluation and audit of your organization first, to really establish like where you are in the profession? You know, like, do you just have an idea, or are you getting started, you know, at like a local level? Or are you actually serving people like globally? You know, because I think in order to understand like all those pieces, you're then understanding like the audience that you're trying to reach. And in order to build that deep level of connection and trust, we also need to understand ourselves and like, you know, the type of help that we need. Um, so then when you kind of like have those two understanding, you can really build like the strategic plan for your brand and what that might look like, you know, once you have like those steps in between that you're going to take to build a good brand. And the way I like to describe it to my clients, because it's so easy to understand, is that there's kind of like three phases like into like design or brand design, right? You have your foundation on your strategy, like this roadmap of like what your organization is going to be, you know, like not just understanding like the demographics, but the psychographics of, you know, like your audience. So what does that personal like trait, what are their personal traits, you know, what their values, you know, like how do you connect with your audience, other than just also understanding your why and all these different other foundational work that you have to do. But then, you know, you then translate that into a more meaningful identity, so like how you show up consistently, like visually, you know, then it's like diving into what your logos are, your marks, but how do you tell like that story like through your design, right? Because when you understand like that foundational piece, you can then build more of an iconic look and understand like how you'll stand out like compared to like other organizations. um and like on top of like all the messaging, right? And then that third phase, I like to say that it's more of like your brand marketing. So like, you know, what your touch points are. So how are you connecting with, you know, your audience? You know, where are you showing up to like connect with them every day and building like that relationship with them and that nourishment relationship. And I think like for just any organization, that's like where the benefits of like working with an experience like agency or a designer will come in handy, because they'll walk you through that creative process and meet you kind of like where you're at. So, you know, they can cater to like a unique solution, creative solution for yourself. So hope.
Oh my gosh, you just told us like all the things.
All the things.
That's really great. No, that's a good set of information. And so I want to unpack a couple of pieces in there that were important. The um, know, like, and trust factor you started with, where people are constantly thinking about this because they want to attract the right clients, attract donors, attract supporters, you know, whatever they're looking for. And building the know, like, and trust factor isn't so easy these days with how much information we're constantly receiving.
Yeah.
So I think that that's one thing that comes to mind is like, how do you navigate the information overload that people are receiving in order to build this brand? You know, you're essentially putting more content out there in front of people. So
Yeah.
how do you manage building a strong brand when people's attention span is so short these days?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that work can come from like that foundational like and strategy moment, you know, when you're first like really just trying to get that bigger picture, because you'll also come up with like key messaging that will really resonate with like the people you're speaking to. You know, if you know, when you understand your audience, it's like if you know your audience is like from a younger generation and they can't really take in so much information, then you're going to keep your messaging short and make sure it's to the punch, you know, so that it that they read it and that they recognize it. And then sometimes I think with people, because they have short attention spans, you have to kind of just like, you know, repeat yourself too, because I think there's like a study saying that people don't really understand what you're saying unless you like repeat it like 3 times. You know, so yeah, I think that a lot of that work is in that messaging and where that foundational piece comes from.
Yeah, and you were mentioning 3 times. I'm like, I think I've heard 7 times actually. So it is a lot. And I just want to get to some of the comments. I know Ale is joining us from Miami. Good to see you, girl. Thanks for being here. Lakeisha is here from Georgia. Good to see you, Lakeisha. I just sent you a friend request, so hopefully we're friends now. And Adriana is here from Rhode Island. Good to see you as well. And it's really, to me, I think beyond foundational, it's something that a lot of people struggle with, is how to create content. You mentioned that being kind of pivotal in the the look and iconic and the feel and sort of the messaging that comes along with that, a lot of people struggle through all of that stuff. I hear it all the time. And so you said, that's why people reach out to folks like you and your organization to get support through that. So, what would be your biggest tip of people if they're in that space of struggling, besides reach out and get help? Like, what do you want people to do in order to get out of that space?
Yeah, I think that's such an important question because so often I get people at so many different levels like asking for, such like a big brand project to really help them position themselves, so that they can really reach their ideal audience. But they don't have like the funding to even like, support something like that marketing side, right? Like how you show up. And so if someone's getting started, I would say like that's when you really need to understand like why you exist and how your organization is structured, because then you can actively create like a plan for your branding, and it's like you don't have to do it all at once. It's just like what are those steps to get there, while you're actively doing that, I would say you continue to build on your connections, in person, whether that's like going to networking events and doing collaboration work, but also like figure out a platform that you know where your audience is like going to be, and really engage with them like on a consistent basis. You can still, without like the look, and feel, you can still like do that back, that work, and make sure that you're like building those relationships like with your audience, because especially like if you're new and you're trying to attract like funding from like donors or like other stakeholders, like you can't just, I think there's like this 70-20-10 rule. I don't know if you know about it in marketing, but it's like 70% should be like, you talking about like your brand, right? And how it really relates to like other people. And 20% of that is like how it should be in relationship to them, like with your brand. And then that 10% is like the only time you actually do like advertisements or like ad or ask for something, so when you're not like continuously like working on building those relationships, like you come to them like 3 months not hearing anything and you're asking for a donation, they may not give it to you, so you want to always make sure that you're constantly showing up and making sure that you're making impact by like telling your story or like sharing like the work that you're still doing, even though you don't have like this like identity for your brand, because you are still building your brand, you know.
Yeah, that's really funny. I know about when you said that the 70-20-10 rule, I was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, and I've heard this many times." And I think we talk about it a lot as entrepreneurs and marketing, and I think it makes sense of the way you interpreted that for, say, like a nonprofit organization. Obviously, if you're seeking a donation, you're not gonna keep coming back and saying, "Donate, donate, donate, donate."
Exactly.
Um, but it is interesting, the strategies that you can use in order to get to that ask, right? To be able to get to that point. And you mentioned in explaining this three parts as well, the alignment of values and how people really are looking for brands that they see their similar values, or they see the same kinds of statements being made, that they recognize the same kind of language. And some of that is known as like attraction marketing. But for impact driven organizations, how is aligning their values, which is so core to impact driven organizations, how does that work in your brand, and how can people maybe be better using their values and what they represent in order to attract the people that they want to talk to?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's about, using your story to really tell, like to really connect deeply on a more emotional level. I kind of talked about this earlier, but I mean, we all know, right? You're going to support people you like, know, and trust, right? So we want to nourish these relationships and really build on that trust, because I think even if you're not like a product selling, brand, the work that you do, you can still tell those stories and connect with people on that emotional level, because people want to see that you're doing the work that you're saying you're going to do, right? Making those promises that you're going to make. Like, um, for example, I think like Charity Water, they're a nonprofit organization, but they basically give access to they give access to clean water for people all around the world, you know, and so but on their website they're showing like stats and like how they're serving, how they're building like this access of water for like people around the world too, to see that, which also makes them credible for what they do and why they exist, right?
Because then the stats are there to build the trust of the organization that when you give them the money, they're actually going to go and do that work. And it demonstrates that they've had success at doing the work before. So it says so many things, but it's also just a pillar of sustainability to be good at communicating how you make an impact, because that is really where, funding and other things come into play long term, and people look at the things that you communicate.
Yeah.
Annual reports, like all of that stuff is important.
Yeah.
So I wanted to invite folks, if you have any questions or any thoughts, feel free to jump into the comments and we'll be able to highlight them, and Michelle can answer any questions that you have. So I'd love to invite you to the conversation. And if you are still interested in joining the Uplevel Your Story Challenge, here's where it's located, as well as the links to all of the 4 conversations that we had live as part of the challenge. And all of that is going to be up, and then it goes away in just 24 hours, except Michelle's conversation will still be up for a little bit longer. So feel free to go over there and get all this information, but it's all going away soon. So that's the ask for the night. Just a reminder, it's there, but it's going to be gone. So going back to the conversation about building trust and the know, like, and trust factor, I think you mentioned a good point with this example of clean water giving. And what is the organization called again?
Charity Water.
Charity Water, right? I was like, I know it's wrong. Charity Water, giving people the information on their website and making it easily accessible for folks. And I think that that's a good tip too about connecting on a deeper level with your audiences. Is like, people who know you are also going to go back to your website again. They're going to come back and see if you put updated information, if you share a new report or something on there. So how can people be using and we talked about digital assets in week 2, how can people be using their digital assets and the space that they have online to support building a strong brand over time?
Yeah, I think it's like I mentioned before, it's like first identifying like, what your basics are. Is what do you need to have like online to show that you're credible? For most people, that's like your website, right? They're going to be able to explore, the type of work you do and who you are. But other platforms, like if you're utilizing like social media, you want to also figure out like where your audience is hanging out, or where are they showing up, so that you're able to like get in front of them and put that information to them, and continue to do that every day, or however often you need to, consistently, and they will expect to see it. Just I think like some if your audience is like more Instagram driven, and it's for a younger demographic, then maybe you wouldn't be on Facebook all the time, and you want to put your efforts into like Instagram, showing up in their stories, showing daily like updates and so forth.
Yeah, and I think that's a good recommendation of like figure out where people are at, because not everybody needs to be everywhere. Today that we are on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook, and that's pretty much everywhere. almost we're not on Instagram. But I think it is an interesting point that LinkedIn traditionally used to be a job seeking platform.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
now you're seeing more people like myself and a lot of others who are creating content around the things that we have as part of our values for our businesses, or part of our values for what we're passionate about. And it's almost like sometimes you get the complaining of, oh, LinkedIn is becoming too much like what Facebook used to be.
Mhm.
Now, though, I think it's cool because you can actually connect to people on a personal level and a professional level. So I think LinkedIn is an excellent platform for impact driven work. And I don't know if you've been successful in LinkedIn at meeting your target audience. But I was just curious with what you're doing. What do you feel is the platform of choice for you in connecting with your audience?
Yeah, I feel like for me personally, and what I found most successful in is actually LinkedIn and how me and you met, Wendy. And I feel like, yeah, like I feel that I've been able to kind of narrow down like the type of people I want to work with. And I found that a lot of social impact leaders, they're actually on LinkedIn, you know? And so I'm able to really connect with them on that like professional level, where we can either just like get to know each other, or I'm also like being able to provide value, you know. I think that that's something that when we show up to our audience, we need to like show them that we're also providing value to their everyday life, because that's and then they'll know like you're not just there to, you know, being, you know, sold on for something, you know. And that's where the authenticity comes from, and like that genuineness comes from, right? And I feel like with for myself, like LinkedIn, I've been able to just have like very organic conversations with people and meeting like new people in this like social impact space, just like you, Wendy.
Yeah, it was really fun when we met. I was like, "Oh my gosh, we have so much in common."
Yeah.
Um, and I love that we instantly were like, "Oh, I can, like, support you in this way, and I can support you in that way," and it was just such a collaborative vibe, so I really appreciate that. And I
Mhm.
think that LinkedIn is great for that, for finding other people to collaborate with, other people to connect with, and people who have, similar but different expertise that could dovetail on yours for a variety of reasons. So if you're an impact-driven organization, the other thing to know about what LinkedIn's been doing lately is LinkedIn now has LinkedIn for nonprofits, which is a very cool space. It's particularly geared for nonprofit professionals, and they have articles and all kinds of interesting stuff over there. So if you haven't checked that out yet, that's another hot tip. Go and check out, what's going on over in LinkedIn for nonprofits. So if
I'm
anybody has any comments,
curious about that. I want to check that out
have
myself.
you haven't seen it yet?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I should have sent you the link. Sorry, I'm a bad girl. I I will share it with you. But if you have any comments, anyone, please feel free to drop them, and we'll be happy to talk about them, or answer any questions that you might have. So I only have a couple more questions for you, Michelle, but I wanted to give you space to talk about anything that you want to talk about for a second, related to, branding, or what you think is, the direction that people who are just starting an impact-based um, initiative or an impact-based organization could go in to start.
Yeah, I feel like, and the reason why I kind of like shifted my creative and like design career to kind of go in this space is because I feel like with um you know, branding in itself, or in the work that we do in the space that we're in, it's a very impactful but yet emotional thing, right? And I feel like with the design world and the branding, like I think that we can really utilize that as like a creative tool to really send out our message, you know, and just how we show up in terms of like really building that deeper connection. And for I think that there's a lot of people who are just getting started and maybe are not there yet to invest into professional branding. So I would say, you know, make sure that you do have plan for it, and really make sure to keep in mind for that, like when um, you're doing your budgets, you know, or when you're trying to get like small or large gifts, like think about your marketing aspects and how that's going to propel you forward. Because oftentimes than not, I feel like a lot of organizations, both like for profit and nonprofit, they can be very successful at what they do already and how they're reaching their audience. Like the engagement is there, you know, like the community is there, but sometimes like they're lacking like this consistency of like showing up. And so I think that I've talked to a lot of clients who I want to help. They're doing such great things. And when I tell them like this is what branding is going to cost, they're like, oh my God, like we can't, we're not there, you know? And so I think in order to get there, you just really need to like strategize that plan, you know, make sure to keep that in the back of your mind, and how you're going to, what, you know, at the level at where you're at, you can do the, you know, relationship building, and keep going where you're at, and even just work with like maybe a designer, like a smaller designer who can just give you some basic needs for how you would look. And then when you pivot into like a bigger, you know, organization, then you can also think about rebranding, you know. But I would say like for number one is to make sure that you have that, like in your marketing plan and budget for it, because while you're successful now, like creativity in itself and like design can really like kind of just push you forward and give you like that push you need. Because I mean, if you look at somebody like Tom's Shoes, right? Like they're, you recognize their slogan. They're like a 1-for-1 program. You basically buy a shoe and then they donate to someone in need, and so they become recognizable because they've really worked at really figuring out who they are as like an organization and how they're going to serve people, but then also like work at their marketing efforts and so forth. So
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up Tom's Shoes. I have a friend who works for Tom's, so
yeah.
shout out to my friend Gigi. Um, there's a lot of things that I think people can do to start, but I hear a lot of the time I don't have the budget for that. That's a very common thing, even with what I do with strategy. People don't feel like it's worth the investment, but I think what they're missing is that the return on their investment is going to be much bigger. And that's the same thing I think with marketing. And I would always encourage people when they were creating a grant budget to put marketing into the budget, and they didn't always know what to do with that information. They didn't always like have any idea to even how to spend that money. So
Yeah.
it is kind of funny to hear you say that, because I'm like, yeah, it makes total sense that some of it would be spent on building a strong brand so that when a program is done, it has a presence and people understand what the program did, and that could lead to other conversations about other funding that might help them sustain over time. And so it all makes sense, but I think we just do a poor job of explaining to impact driven entrepreneurs or impact driven organizations why communication and marketing and PR is so essential for long-term sustainability. Like, we don't really connect that thread very well. So if you're just joining us today, we're talking with Michelle. Tonight's guest is part of the Uplevel Your Story Challenge, and we're looking at how do you connect deeper with your existing audiences, how do you build a strong brand as an impact-driven organization, and how do you just get started. We have a bunch of information that Michelle already dropped in this episode, so we're going to keep going for just a couple more minutes, and then we'll let Michelle get on with the rest of her evening, because it's still pretty early in the West Coast. So when I was asking you earlier about, values-driven organizations, exactly where you went when we left off with Tom's, I was thinking this would be a fun activity to talk a little bit about who are these big brands that we think of that are impact-driven. And if anybody has in the comments, if you want to drop a suggestion, we already mentioned Tom's, but if there is another brand that you can think of just right off the top of your head that comes to mind as like, oh, this is a really good example of an impact driven brand, drop it in the comments. And I want to hear what people come up with, because I know I have my list of regulars that I talk about or I think about or that I've written about in blog posts. But do you have one besides Tom's that comes to mind for you, Michelle?
Yeah, I was actually going to share, and I was going to be like, why don't you share yours too? But for me, I would say one that's at the top of my mind would be Patagonia. It's I'm sure people have heard of Patagonia, but their mission is to really produce like quality, like durable clothing, but they focus on sustainable practices, and they're all about like social impact, like fashion. They're like a social impact fashion brand. So I love what they do and how they like really practice sustainable like clothing making, and with the materials they use, how they show up in their outdoor community. But that's one that sticks out for me the most. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I love it. So one that I talk about just because I'm a dog like fanatic. People who know me, everybody knows like there's dogs in my content like all the time.
Yeah.
And so Kong Toys has found a
Mhm.
way to give the toys that are defects to shelters for shelter dogs,
Mhm.
which I think is really super sweet. And they have it on their website. It's very clear up in the front. It says, if you are a shelter, here's how we partner with you. And they're like very open about it. So
Yeah.
what you were saying earlier about, making sure that that information is available and recognizable, I think they've done a really good job at showing people, not only you, if you buy a Kong toy, you're contributing towards this mission, but also if you are a shelter, here's how you could benefit from this mission. And it's kind of like two different statements, two different audiences, two different pieces of messaging, but they did a really good job at interweaving that into their website. So that's the one that I offer. And I don't see anybody dropping any in the chat, but I don't know if you have any others you want to talk about, Michelle. And then we'll go on to the last couple of questions.
Okay. No, I mean, some of the other bigger companies, just to kind of put some of them out there, is like even Google, or like Nike, and like those are big brands. You think about Nike and you think about like their symbol, right? Like their Nike symbol and their slogan, just do it. But they're also like consciously with their, even though they're in such like different industries, like they're also like more conscious about like the types of um, things that they're supporting. And so like they're putting that in their forefront, which is making also like them more revenue as well. So there's so many different ways you can think about these successful companies and like what they're strategically doing like to really help with that. And again, I think it's really just understanding who you are first and what your unique situation is, so you can like strategically like come up with a plan for your marketing efforts. So
Yeah, and it's a good point that a lot of these brands do use their impact work to drive more profit, but that is supposed to then go back into more impact. So it's kind of like a little loop that has been created by corporate social responsibility programs in some places. And also shout out to Adriana, who works for Verizon, who works for their CSR group. So excuse me, I don't remember her actual title, but she's amazing. So and I think she was here a little bit earlier. I don't know if she's still around. So the last question that I wanted to ask you is really about thinking about all these different audiences that people have. Particularly, we mentioned earlier, like impact-driven organizations might have donors, they might have funders, they might have, politicians who follow them, or clients and customers and different groups of people that they work with. So when you think about all of that, how do you build a brand that is strong enough, or that will appeal to so many different people with so many different needs or so many different purposes? So I guess it's kind of the question really is, how do you either focus in or be everything for everyone? I think this is something people get really confused about. So I
yeah,
want to know.
no, I know, definitely. But I think that that's where like that foundational work and that strategy is so important, because then you can really list out like who you're trying to target, right? Is that like really, do you want to have different streamlines of target audience, and so then how would you break that down, right? So that's why I feel like a lot of times people even come to me just for like design work, and I'm like, okay, well, before we even dive into that, let's sit down and really figure out like a roadmap of who you're trying to serve. And so I think that if you're trying to cater to so many different people, your messaging is not going to sound, like your messaging is just going to be all over the place. So I feel like there needs to be some sort of strategic plan in terms of, you can appeal to this bigger audience, but maybe there are other people who can, it's like also inclusive to how you're creating your other messages, so you can have multiple. And so that when you're showing up in different places, you have like what your messaging is going to be for those different types of audience. But I do feel like you don't want to be too broad, just because then I feel like you lose that uniqueness, and how you're going to sound so specific to a certain type of group that you're actually trying to reach. But I feel like, you can be strategic about it and have different messaging for like other areas of where you would show up. Or other ideas is also running campaigns, if you want to run different campaigns for different audiences, or you just have a solid messaging for your ideal audience, and then it's like the campaigns are for like these different other areas of people you want to reach. But yeah, I feel like a big part of it is like, you want to really narrow down how you speak to people, because that's when you build that connection, specifically even with social impact, right? There's certain words, or there's certain terminology that we use and we understand, versus for somebody who's just like in the sports industry or like the beauty industry, right? The way you speak to them are going to be completely different. So you have to think about, when you're setting your foundations, you're really thinking about like how you're approaching like your messaging and the words you use, or the emotions that you're really creating with these types of people.
Yeah, there's so many good things to talk about in all of that too that I want to get to. I think with the people of, well, the idea of segmenting and focusing, in addition to having your general message that people understand. We talked about that a little bit with Nishay last week in advanced storytelling, that the campaigns and really digging into what your audience needs and how to communicate to them. And that is just like, can't reinforce that enough because I think that is really important.
Yeah.
And mapping back to, well, what is this audience really feeling, or what are their pain points, or what are the learning opportunities, what are the things that we can connect with those audiences about. And it doesn't always have to be, the same thing over and over again. So I love the idea of tying in campaigns and focusing down on your audience, but then still keeping something that is generally going to support your brand as like the base and the foundation of what you do. So last question I have for you, my dear, is really about you. And if you could tell us a little bit more about, who might want to work with you, how would they get in touch with you? Where can people find you online? And if they're interested in heard anything they wanted to hear, more from you after this episode, where can they reach you?
Yeah, thank you for that. So if you want an opportunity to just kind of like work in collaboration together, that's kind of how I work with other like leaders who are looking to make change. So if you're a social impact organization, whether for profit, nonprofit, but you just really have a cause that or a mission that you're trying to support, and create a better world, like I'm that person for you. But if you're looking to really be in a place of also a student, but also like in collaboration, like that's the type of people I want to work with. You can fill out like an inquiry form, like on my website. I don't know if we can put that somewhere, Wendy, but it's going to be www.michellehe.com. It's just my name. Or you can also email me. I'm at hello@michellehe.com. Or you can follow me on Instagram. It's just Michelle He on Instagram. But yeah, that's how you could work with me and get connected with me if you want to just like say hi or anything like that.
I forgot the dot and .com, so I'm pulling it back up. There we go, michellehe.com. All right, there you go. So it has been great, everybody, to have you guys for the last 4 weeks. We've been talking about all of the things related to your impact story and how can you take yourself on a journey to, one, uplevel your story, but two, to make a bigger impact by getting the support that you need to do the work that you want to do. And so these 4 weeks have been part of the challenge that I ran throughout the month of February, and you're more than welcome to still hop into the challenge. I'll put the link up one more time. This is where you can find it, and all of the information is going to be going away in March. Sorry, guys, that's around the corner. I can't believe it's already March. It's just insane. No. So the reason it's all going away in March is because we're getting ready for a brand new set of things to happen. The Social Impact Level Up is going to enter into its second season as a podcast, which means we have interviews just like the one that you heard tonight. And we're going to be talking about all things related to social entrepreneurship with some amazing, amazing people, a set of truly inspiring stories. There should be 40 of them this season, and you'll get to hear all about how people overcame challenges, how they're successfully doing impact-based work around the whole globe, and how people are really just transforming the world and being amazing every single day. I can't wait to share these stories with you guys. I'm really excited about it. And starting with the last week of March, Rodrigo and I will be here live, and we will be talking about what is happening with the collective and what is going on for season 2, launching the whole thing. And we're really excited. Hope you guys can be with us. So really happy to start that. All that whole body of work is going to be happening throughout March. You'll hear more about it, and just stay tuned for more. So thanks, Michelle, for being here tonight. It's been such an awesome conversation, and it was good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. We'll have to catch up another time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye, everyone. Thanks to anyone who is here with us.